Hi there, welcome to If I Knew You Better. My name is Brendan Davis, and I appreciate you listening. I'm going to keep my intro pretty short, and I'm happy to bring you this week's show, so I want to get right to it. My guest this week is Billy SAMOA SALEEBEY, and the Samoa comes from the fact that he was actually born in American Samoa, which is interesting. I think he's the only person I know with that distinction. He has quite an interesting background and resume. He has stints at Varango as well as Solar City, and that led to Tesla. We talk about all kinds of things: climate change, sustainability, independent filmmaking, corporate media. Billy has worn a lot of hats, and he's integrated his different insights and experiences and lessons learned into his media production company, as well as his podcast called Insight Out, which is really, really good. Billy and I first met, we're going to talk about it. I'm not going to give it away in the intro, but we met, 13 years ago. And it's been really great to watch his journey in all these years and to see where he's landed so far, and what he's up to is really pretty cool and fascinating. I'll have links for you at the end of the show so you can check out more online. But for now, please enjoy my interview, my conversation with Billy SAMOA SALEEBEY. Well, I'm happy to be talking today on the Zoom machine with Billy SAMOA SALEEBEY. How are you doing, man?
I'm good. Brendan, thanks for having me on the show.
I'm really glad to have you. I know you from way back in the day, but let's hear it from you. What is kind of your brief background, and I'll maybe add a little color once you say your piece here.
Sure, absolutely. So, we originally met way back when, and I had a film called Rolling, and the film was about ecstasy. So it definitely had a niche audience, and that niche audience was anyone that had ever experimented or explored with the drug MDMA, more commonly known as ecstasy. There was a lot of people that had at least some level of interest to find out more about what this movie was all about. We had the good fortune of taking the film to festivals all over the country and really all over the world. One of the greatest moments of that journey was getting to meet filmmakers all over the world that were also working on great projects, and you're one of those people. So what I could tell you is, for me, my journey has been one that I wouldn't have imagined out of film school. I spent 7 years making the movie, from the point of writing it all the way to the point of getting distribution in 2009. So the idea and the concept came in 2003. We wrote it in 2003, 2004, and then ultimately shot it in 05, edited it in 06, took it to festivals in 07, which is, I think, around the time when we met.
Yeah, Dances with Films 2007.
That's right, yeah. And then got distribution in 09. And so my whole career took a major shift in 2010 when I got involved in Renewable. So, briefly, I went from a film career to a sales career. And that sales career ultimately led me to have multiple roles within solar company to start, Varango Solar. That led me to Solar City, where I ended up becoming head of training at Solar City. And that ultimately led me to Tesla, where I ended up being in charge of all new hire onboarding. So I was the director of onboarding for Tesla globally. So anyone that started with Tesla, my team came up with that initial experience. And so I really tapped into my film background by creating experiences that were, I would call them experiential, where there was media, there's video, there's obviously speakers, there's different stations where people can experience things about Tesla. So we'd bring out cars and people could do test drives and all these fun moments that would create this lasting impression on any new hire at Tesla. And so as things would evolve, my role changed there as well. And I left there January of last year as the head of all training for sales and product. So global sales and product training. So that's my story, man.
Wow. Well, that's pretty crazy. I did not. We were chatting some, and pardon the leaf blower, everybody. Welcome to quarantine reality. Leaf blowers aren't going to stop for no virus, man. Blow it around as much as possible. But we did not talk about that when we were chatting before we kind of started. When did you start at Solar City? Just as a point of reference?
So yeah, I started Solar City 2015. So it's funny because when I went over, and I failed to mention this, which I think it does play into our conversation, is when I started at Solar City, one of the initial projects I was given was to work on all internal communications. So I created a TV show and a program called Solar City TV. We built a $250,000 studio, and we had a weekly broadcast that I produced and worked with the whole production team. We're talking 3 cameras. It was a legit operation, and we had this incredibly charismatic leader that was the chief revenue officer, Hayes Barnard, who would come on and really inspire the audience to and when I say the audience, there was mainly anyone that worked at Solar City, all internal, mainly the sales group. So about 7,000 salespeople, inspire them to do their job as effectively as possible and give them a vision of what's going to happen in the future. And so part of that future would ultimately us become Tesla.
So that is fascinating. And you are also, tell me what you're doing these days in terms of creative, because you have you have a little endeavor of your own. You're talking to me from a very nice looking home studio setup. That's a little fancier than what I have going on here.
Well, it's certainly nothing too fancy, but yeah, no, I decided as I left corporate life, I had a decision. I could get back into another corporate role, which I really didn't have a ton of interest in for a variety of reasons. And we could go get into that in a bit. But ultimately, I wanted to parlay my experience as a trainer in the training and learning and development world, and with my creative background, my filmmaking background, and sort of merge those two into one. And so I formed a media company, Insight Media. And the genesis, or sort of the idea behind this, is to focus on moments that occur in our lives that spark what I'll call a new beginning or a new trajectory when we have these moments of insight. And these moments of insight are so critical to just development in general, because when you think about learning happens when something new is presented to us. We're conditioned, and our brain is hardwired to almost not pay attention to the normal, not pay attention to the things that we're used to. What it does do is when something's different, when something's unique, it all of a sudden our brain is alerted to pay attention because it's novel, it's new. And so when I formed my company, the idea behind it is I want to work on projects that will present ideas and concepts that will hopefully spark an insight or spark something in the audience's mind that will give them a chance to maybe pause for a moment and think about how could this be applied in their own life. So I started a podcast called Inside Out, sort of a play on words. So that podcast I launched in September of last year. And so it's a weekly show. And along with that, I'm working on a lot of media associated with the concepts that are presented in the show. So I have videos that are coming out on a weekly basis in addition to the podcast. I'm also working behind the scenes on some other projects, a documentary that I want to do that's focused on businesses that are not just doing well financially, but they're actually doing it the right way from a sustainability standpoint, from a corporate responsibility standpoint, that they're actually taking care of their employees standpoint. So a company like a Patagonia, for example, is one that comes to mind. So that project is something that with everything going on, we're going to see what the timetable is, but my plan was to start shooting the end of this year. That may get delayed a little bit. But nevertheless, my intention and my goal now is to focus on ideas that hopefully will do something that's going to better us as human beings, but also do the right thing to help make the planet a better place to live.
I think that sounds really, really cool. And I'll tell you more about this off mic, I guess, but I'm also producing and directing a documentary feature that I shot. It's for an organization called Horasis, which is a global think tank helping developed and developing countries work together to find solutions to all these problems of development in a way that's sustainable, ethical, transparent, etc. And they have these global meetings. They have like 4 or 5 big meetings a year. And actually, at the end of this week, I'm supposed to be in Cascais, Portugal, for the global meeting as a participant, moderating a couple of panels, and also, or moderating a panel and participating in some other things, and then also doing my documentary. And then, of course, it's all shut down now.
Yeah, no, it's definitely challenging times for sure, and I think ultimately we will get through this current era that we find ourselves in. And the one thing I'll say though is it's interesting how challenges, they say the mother of innovation, right, is when you are presented with these challenging moments in our lives. And even though there are many certain views on the current state of affairs and how we should be handling the virus and how we should be handling ourselves relative to the virus, ultimately, I think we will be stronger in the end as a result of this happening. That old adage, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. And I hate to use those terms, but it's actually, I believe it is a very true to life statement, because we will be stronger overall. We will be better at our jobs. We will be more efficient. We will be more mindful in how we interact. Yes. But ultimately that will help us the next time something like this happens. And so I think, we have to allow ourselves to continue to thrive despite not having the exact same maybe timetable that we were planning for our projects.
Well, I'm glad you got into that, because that's one of the things I wanted to get into talking about, and you sort of went right there. Let's maybe kind of work our way up to future reality and takeaways, positive and negative. How are you dealing, like right now? You mentioned, of course, for instance, you're, depending on how long we're kind of down, your there may be challenges. There's obviously certain kinds of work we can't go do, certain kinds of production, most production. So we're sort of limited to what we're doing now, or something that can be done remotely or as a cell. So how is this affecting you at the moment?
Yeah, for me, I'd say it affects me far less than it affects, I would say, the majority. And the reason why is most of my work was done at home. Even when I had my corporate job, I traveled, call it 2 to 4 days a week. But the rest of that time, I didn't go into an office. And there were weeks where I didn't travel at all. So I know for many people out there, this will affect them in a much more, I would say, immediate way. How it affects me more long-term is as businesses, so for my documentary, for example, businesses are changing, they're evolving as a result of the coronavirus. And in doing so, as they evolve, ultimately, I got to consider what is the challenges that they're being faced with, and what changes do I ultimately need to make to my through line and the premise of my documentary as a result. So I think I need to change what my approach is, because my last 10 years of my life have been dedicated to fight climate change through the companies that I work for. So Solar City, Tesla, the solar company Varango before Solar City, all of the work that we did it had a purpose, it had a mission. And so it wasn't an intentional thing to begin with. I'll be super blunt with you. I got in by accident just because I was helping my brother with some media projects for a solar company that he worked for. I was making a video, and ultimately I was like, wait, you can go solar. You don't pay anything out of pocket. You get solar panels on your roof. You pay less for electricity. It all sounded amazing. Why wouldn't everybody do this? So I was like, I might as well try this myself. And I had immediate success, and that success, it was a long cresting wave that I rode to the point where I was, 1 degree of separation from Elon Musk at my last company. So yeah. I just never got off the wave. But what happened as a result of me being on that wave, it inspired me to make my life's work about protecting our planet, because we only have one. And so I'm on a mission to help people. And when I say people, companies and people do the things necessary to better our planet. And so that means that being more thoughtful and mindful. And so when you ask the question, like, how has this changed me? I think it's going to change the story. And ultimately the story is evolving on a day-to-day basis. And so that's where it's affecting me. The other way it's affecting me is I'm now inspired to do more projects that are at least tangentially related to the current state of affairs, right? How can you not? I mean, how can you not have a conversation right now and this not come up? And so I produced a video and edited a short video that I put out last week. You know, it was about the 1918. It was about the flu, but specifically about a parade that they held in Philadelphia. It was a war bond parade, and 200,000 people crowded the streets of Philadelphia. And this is one of the major catalysts to the disease, to the virus spreading rapidly.
Oh, okay. No way. So that was an incubation, like a hot spot, basically, where it broke out. Wow. Well,
they it's funny because they said, okay, there's this flu going around. We don't think it's anything more than the normal flu. Well, it was the Spanish flu. And that's what they called it, which, you know, right or wrong, that's still...
Most of them have been called by a name.
Yeah. So they called it the Spanish flu.
Like a place name.
But the interesting thing, which I didn't know until doing a bit of research, they called it the Spanish flu, not because it originated from Spain, but because Spanish media was the first to kind of really speak about it publicly.
I heard that. Yeah, I heard that like as a little tidbit the other day.
Yeah. So it's so unfortunate that it's been labeled the Spanish flu. It's not because it's from there. It's not because it's their fault in any way. In fact,
they sort of they sort of promoted the awareness of it.
They just weren't censored like they were everywhere else. And so to their own misfortune. But my point is, so, you know, despite all the warning signs, despite all of the things that they could have looked at, they had this event take place. And within a matter of days, every hospital in the town, or not in the town, but in the city of Philadelphia were filled. Within a matter of weeks, 6 weeks, I think 12,000 people died in the Philadelphia area, which is a staggering number. If you think about, you know, just like at COVID, right? We're talking about panic globally, and still relatively few people have died. When you look at the Spanish influenza, 50 million people died. And granted, we have a lot more awareness. We're I think we have a lot faster communication path than they ever had. But it's still scary to look at those numbers.
Yeah, because our population 102 years ago was also much lower. I don't know the numbers. You probably have that in your head, but the percentage of population, so 50 million is a massive number. And then considering what a huge chunk of the population that was, that means, it probably meant that if out of every 4 people you knew, one of them died or something. I mean, I don't know the numbers, but
I don't remember the exact, but I did read it and I don't remember it right now. I do know that in the U.S., 675,000 people died from that. And to your point, our population was far less than it is today. So
not nearly as mobile, not nearly as, you know, not traveling as much. So the fact that it spread the way it did with our life and our travel and communication standards back in the day, it's pretty amazing.
I was just going to say it affected people more at a younger age, which is also different than what we're currently battling with. It was actually the 19 to 30-year-olds that got it the worst. Strangely. So they're the most deaths.
Well, we were talking before we started that you had just began listening to the Ben Rock episode, who's your predecessor on this series from last week as we released this. And he actually had a lot to say about the 1918 flu. So it's really interesting that you brought that up as well, and that you've done some work behind it. So I'm sensing a theme here.
And it's funny because I didn't like, as I said, I didn't get a chance to listen to the full episode.
Yeah, you didn't get to that point.
I didn't get to that point, but I did agree with everything that I was hearing him talk about. But you got to look at history. I think it's foolish not to even. And I know there's going to be the people out there that say, well, it was a different thing. It was a different time. Yes, but that doesn't mean that we can't learn. And what it is about is we've heard this buzzword of flatten the curve. And if you look at the charts of when you compare a city like St. Louis to Philadelphia, in St. Louis, they took immediate action. They closed the schools. They closed all public halls, all movie theaters. Everything was closed very, very quickly. And when you look at the chart,
right,
when you put them next to each other, you're going to see a huge spike in Philadelphia versus a little mound for St. Louis. And so all we're saying, and when I say we, I think generally those that believe in what we're doing now, and I certainly don't claim to be an epidemiologist or an expert in this, but what I do is read and listen to experts. And I think at a bare minimum, we owe it to our older population to give them a fighting chance.
Yes.
And we don't do that if we overwhelm our hospitals to the point where a decision needs to be made between a 78-year-old grandmother and a 42-year-old father of two who's probably a bit healthier, right? So that's what's happening in Italy. There's triage-based decisions being made on whether someone lives or dies. It's 2020. We don't need to be making those kind of decisions. We have the technology and the medical know-how to save people's lives. And yes, this is going to impact the economy, but I do passionately believe that an economy will come back, but a human life won't.
What are some of as you look ahead, I mean, again, I've mostly worked from home myself, for decades, with some notable exceptions here and there, or the prepping, and then you go to a set or whatnot to do the actual task, but then the rest of the work's at home. So adaptations for someone like me or you are not really that noticeable. But what do you think will be some of the kind of the knock-on downstream effects of this, in terms of, you've touched on it a little bit already, but the way that we approach work, life, treat each other, practical things? I mean, I think Zoom is feeling like they're in the catbird seat right now. Zoom has become like a common reference point in the social vernacular. It used to be that unless you were like a frequent LinkedIn user, you'd never heard of Zoom. And now my mom's asking me about it, So what are some of the things that you think, little crystal ball time, we'll revisit that?
Yeah, no, it'd be interesting as a time capsule to kind of look back and see. So as a Zoom user, and when I say a Zoom user, I've been using Zoom daily since 2015, since I started at Solar City. So okay. I know the platform very, very, very well.
You do.
And I've used it in a variety of situations and for a variety of reasons, mainly because the way, as I mentioned, my initial job at Solar City was to build this platform, this Solar City television. So we would do large scale broadcasts through Zoom. So one of the people that I worked with ended up going to work for Zoom.
Oh, okay.
And so I've seen Zoom grow, and I've been I will call it a loyal user of Zoom for many, many years. And it's hard to believe that I've been using it as long as I have, and that it's just now becoming more of a household name as a result of this. So I do think Zoom itself I believe in the platform. I think it's a fantastic platform, great leadership. And I just think its ease of use is fantastic. And I think if you think about how much time is spent driving from your house to work, and you multiply that times the number of days you work in your life, I actually made a video about this because it's insane. And the average person is driving 60 minutes a day, in America. You add that up, and your years and years, I forget, I think it was like 4 years of your life, 5 years of your life, I can't remember, I don't have the number in front of me, is spent driving. Mm-hmm. So let's put coronavirus, put it on the side. And think about productivity of ourselves and how we spend our time. Would you rather spend that time getting something done, spending more time with your family, using it in some other way, or spending it behind a wheel? So that gives you one compelling reason to have more remote work being done. I think the biggest thing this will do is it'll make remote work more acceptable. Now, that being said, we are social creatures by nature. And so I think we have to take into account that we as a species want to connect, and we want to connect not just like you and I are through the computer screen, we want to connect in person. So I don't think we're going to get to a place, and I hope we don't get to a place where it is this sort of digital world where it's all VR, AR, like where it's like everybody's got their own avatar. I don't want to get to that place.
Let's have our meeting on Saturn today, and then
exactly
you have the VR background of like you're in the 3D space with your goggles.
I mean, there will be some of that, and I don't want to. I mean, I don't
some
want to.
Of that might be cool, but that's probably more for like an entertainment mode.
Exactly.
You know, yeah.
And so, but on the note of entertainment, I'm curious how things evolve when you look at a company like Disney, or a company, or for that matter, all of the major studios, and how they ultimately shift as a result of this, because we already know we're getting into an era where more and more media is pushed out to online at a rapid pace, right? I mean, even major, The Irishman, right? I mean, they did
the nominating. They did the eligibility theatrical.
They just did
LA,
enough
New
to
York, but that's it. Yeah, just to be eligible for Academy Awards, but it was basically straight to Netflix.
So that I think that's already sort of, that ship is sailing, and where it ends up landing, I think, is to be determined. But it's probably, the course was, I think, shortened as a result of this. But as far as, to your question, I think ultimately awareness matters, and you yourself have spent a lot of time, a lot of your time in China, and you've got to see firsthand how people interact, especially in public settings. So I would turn that question back on you and ask you the same thing. Like you're almost seeing what it looks like future state if we as Americans use the awareness that we have. But I don't know, will we get to a point where when you leave the house you put on a mask every time? I don't know.
Yeah.
Is that how it is in China?
I was pretty used to that. I didn't wear a mask all the time. And I mean, before this, just in terms of times when a lot of people would. Basically, the rule of thumb for those who don't know, I mean, people probably have a general awareness, but essentially in China, as well as many other Asian cultures, not all that I know enough to say this, if you don't feel well, you wear a mask. Or if there's something going around, you wear a mask to protect yourself. So it's really super common. I mean, that's the reflexive thing. It's almost like if it's seasonal allergy time, you might stick a tissue in your pocket. Just like, let me have this handy. The difference is the mask is on your face and it's visible. But it's super, super standard practice. It's not weird to be out in public. I mean, again, pre-coronavirus, pre-COVID-19, it's not strange at all to be out in public and see tons of people wearing their masks, just because maybe they don't feel that great, and it's a consideration thing against sharing your germs with other people. And I think that's part of why their measures have been effective. So I appreciate, without getting down the rabbit hole, and my medical degree's from Google University, so it doesn't really count. But from what I've read and seen and heard, I know that there's they're encouraging people, don't wear masks if you're healthy here. That's been the rule. Oh, it's actually more dangerous because, and then all the becauses are if you're not doing it right. There's nothing about wearing the mask if you're otherwise healthy to protect yourself. There's nothing bad about that. The point is, generally, what you don't realize is, you're actually touching a thing and then adjusting the mask, and then you're transferring.
Sure.
Maybe you pick something. Yes, that's true regardless. But I've got to go. Actually, my one trip that I'll be making out of the house, probably I didn't leave since like 5-6 days ago at all. A friend's going to loan me a GoPro because I've got I'm doing a video. I'm joining a video. I'm being interviewed on a video show, and I don't have a decent camera here, just this little webcam, which sucks. So I'm going to meet, my friend's going to loan me your GoPro, and we're going to meet and do like the arm's length handoff in the bag. And I'm going to wear my damn mask. wear my mask, and I'll just see. There aren't really that many people in the streets. I'll see people just like part. I'll just see if people just like walk the other way, But I've got a nice, and I have one to my name, but I have a nice respirator N95 mask that's the one that I kept, I used like 3 surgical masks on that trip over from China, but it's
a hot commodity, man. You could probably sell that on eBay.
It's gently used, very little virus, gently used virus, only one owner. But your question, I sort of answered it, and I also sort of went off on a tangent, as I want to do. To me, I think that there's a lot we can learn from each other. I think I have a lot of thoughts, and I'm trying to sort of summarize it. I'm happy to be a guest on your show if you want to ask me a lot of questions. I'm just trying not to take over my own show with my answers. But there's a lot we can learn from each other, which is part of why I'm doing this. And on my original podcast called Big Fish in the Middle Kingdom, I've just rebooted it, doing short things that are just about how are you dealing with this, and it's people all over the world, China, name the country. So it's an eclectic group of people that's really mission driven to help this understanding. But did I answer your question, or did I just?
You did, and I think I'm probably in the minority that knew that it's a consideration thing based upon if you're not feeling well, you put it on. But to your point, I don't think the majority of people, at least in the Western world, know that to be true.
They look at you. I flew back the flight from Beijing to SFO, where I came into where Larry picked me up. Full flight, completely full flight. I got actually the last ticket because there was an issue, and they had bought the ticket for the wrong day. United keyed it in wrong. Anyway, by the time they fixed it, and I'm standing there at the airport, the last ticket was me. Wow. So masks, and again, change mask a few times, but everyone, completely full flight, every single person's wearing a mask. A lot of people are wearing gloves. All the flight attendants, masks and gloves. Some even have eyewear on. This was January 26. Wow. Okay. So this is about 2 months ago.
This is crazy, though. You think about how far behind we are. Like the fact that was happening.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. This was January 26, everybody. And today, as we record, this is coming out Friday. This is Monday, March 23rd. This will be coming out basically 2 months and a day from when I bugged out. So, so got back, and I was 2 nights at his house, and then I had to I flew to my mom's, and I was there 2.5 weeks. Flew SFO to Atlanta, took a shuttle van where I was me and the driver, only people in the thing, to my mom's in Birmingham, Alabama, and then reversed that trip. So on the flight, that's the necessary setup for the funny story, is that flight from Beijing to here, 13 hours on a plane, fully masked, most people gloved, hand sanitizer, the whole deal. Didn't need a thing, just want to keep that damn mask on.
Yeah.
And no problems getting to the airport. It's a sea of masks, arriving at SFO, sea of masks. So the flight from SFO to Atlanta, I was the only white person wearing a mask that I saw in the entire airport on the departures. Right. At my gate, turned out my like Delta flight was a code share with, I think, China Southern or one of the Chinese airlines. And there was a small group of people who, and I could hear them, they were Chinese people, and they were all wearing masks. And then me. And it's funny because as I sort of walked to find a seat and sort of wait at the gate, I saw those people and they were speaking Chinese. And so I said hello to them and, hope everybody's well. I said it in Chinese. And so they go, and then I sat my ass down. And then there were like other like Western people just looking at me. This is audio only, so audience can't see look, but they were looking at me and like some people got up and moved. I wasn't sitting right by anybody, but some people who were 2 seats over got up and moved. The guy who was across from me and catty-cornered a little bit, he just sort of like he gathered his things. It was so wild because I'm sitting there wearing a mask. And I'm like a long-haired, like white dude, so I'm obviously not Chinese. And also they heard me speak Chinese, so that probably freaked them out a little bit. Mostly because it's so bad if they know Chinese. Mostly
it's going to be interesting, man.
Dude, your accent sucks. Yeah, that's another story.
Well, what will be interesting to see is how this affects industry. When I say that, what I mean is, so airlines, we're not going to stop flying places, but we are going to, I think, change. It's like 9/11, right? And I did hear this part of the podcast where you talk about, the shoes and whatnot. And you mentioned how, sort of ironically, in other parts of the world, you don't have to take off your shoes, but here you do have to take off your shoes, exactly. Right? So
somehow they mastered that detection technology with the magic rugs that have the wires to detect. But somehow we can't do that.
This one
I
actually
think it's a social control thing. I sort of said that to Ben.
Interesting. Well, I mean, I because I flew so much when I had my corporate job, I had all the TSA pre-check, I had clear, global. I had everything, right?
So you could just cruise through.
I could just cruise through. I never had to deal with it, but I can say this in particular hits home because my cousin was the pilot flying the plane that the shoe bomber was on. He literally had
what?
Yeah.
What?
So
that's insane.
He actually had to fly it to safety. So
oh my gosh.
Yeah. No. So but
brush with history.
Really. But the point is, when you think about it, like, okay, air travel, hotels, all of these things where there's communal sharing of air, one could imagine that we're going to get smarter and better at creating shared spaces that are safer. Whether that mean more people are wearing masks or maybe the air filtration system improves, what have you. I don't know all the particulars, but there's certainly industry impact being made that will ultimately allow companies to treat this as an opportunity. And I think that you could apply that to cruise ships. I mean, as much as I personally don't like cruise ships, there are many, many people that do.
Yeah, I've been on one, and it was like, it's like, okay, so this is like a mall that floats.
I know, right?
With people I wouldn't want to talk to.
You and I don't like them, but there's people that do.
Yeah.
So you got to imagine something's going to get rectified. I mean, I don't think the industry will die altogether. I think it's badly hit right now. And I think ultimately speaking, it will take a long time for it to get back to where it was prior to all this happening. But I believe in the power of innovation. And innovation is such an important piece to how we evolve. And, necessity is what we are at right now. We need these innovations. We need these changes. And it could be applied to any industry. And so I think for your listeners, especially those that have entrepreneurial spirit, is there's going to be so much opportunity when there's a major shift like this. And this is a major socioeconomic shift that spans, we could talk for hours just about all of the particulars of that. But when you think about all these changes that are happening, that means there's opportunity for us as creators and filmmakers and to work on projects that people are going to be like preppers, for example. Like there's going to be new interest in preppers. There's going to be new interest in end of the world themed things. There's going to be new interest in epidemic and pandemic themed projects and all these things that, there's already been a lot of those things, but there'll be even more. And so I think this could be applied to any industry. And for somebody that's thinking about it from an opportunistic standpoint, not like to take advantage of the virus, but to take advantage of the fact that we as a species are evolving, tap into that and figure out how you can parlay the current situation. And as sad as it is, there is going to be plenty of opportunity as well.
I would love to get your thoughts because, again, this is why I want to get on the interview with you. I mean, we've chatted and sort of touched base very briefly here and there over the years, but it's been a long time since we had an in-depth conversation. But from what you post, and you're doing your podcast and these things, I mean, I've gotten to see this sense of where you've landed in 2020, right? We've all grown and changed and evolved for the better, hopefully. And you definitely have. And so have I think. So I'd love to get your take on, related to what you just said, I'd love to get your take on what you think knock-on societal impact changes, whether that's sociocultural, political. I mean, just what are your thoughts about where? I mean, near term, and then maybe throw it out to the medium term. And if you want to take a guess at long term, go right ahead. But I wouldn't want to put that on anybody because I think that's a little hard to focus.
Well, it's the irony that we're in the 20s is pretty interesting, because if somebody told me 3 months ago that the Dow Jones would be in the 1800s, that 18,000, that we would be looking like we're going to have 20% unemployment or more, that banks were going to potentially forgive mortgages, that Kobe Bryant was no longer around, like all these things have happened.
Sure,
like, I mean,
sure.
And I know, there's just a lot that has changed very rapidly. Of course, the Kobe Bryant thing, I throw that in, as a sort of a side note, but significant nonetheless, because that was a moment that affected, I think, had a global effect on us in a lot of ways. But the point I'm making is the 20s is going to have a monumental effect on what the rest of this century looks like. And where I think, if I don't qualify myself as a psychic, but what I think will happen over the next, I'll start with long term. I think if we look back at this century, what we're going to see most advancement in is biotech.
Right.
If the last 50 years has been information and the spread of information through social media and internet and Internet of Things and everything that goes into that, I think the next 30 to 50 years and all through the end of the century will be advancement in our medicine. And so the reason I start with that is that sort of dovetails into the current political environment that we're in, which I don't like to label myself any one thing, but I certainly lean more progressive, but progressive with limits. And so when I say that, I'll just, anyone could go on my Facebook page and see, where I stand politically.
Sure.
But I certainly don't, and I'll just go straight into it. I certainly don't want the current administration to stay in office. And for a lot of reasons, well before this current situation. But I do think everyone should have access to affordable healthcare. Do I necessarily think that it should be all paid for by the government? What I'll say is yes, for those that can't afford it. And for those that can afford healthcare, I do think that part of the reason we have some of the advancements we have technologically speaking is because there's money that's in that industry. And so I think we have to be really mindful of avoiding getting into something where if the government runs something 100%, how does that ultimately damage the ability for the for whatever it is to thrive, whether that be the school system, the healthcare system, anything, right? So I do think it's a blend of business and government working with business, because I ultimately think that the most powerful engine that we have going forward will be business. And if we can think of creative ways to influence business to help climate change, if we can think of creative ways for business to influence healthcare, if we can think of creative ways for business to influence even our education system. And I think it's a marriage between people that are doing business the right way, that are taking care of their employees. And this goes back to my idea for the documentary. They're taking care of their employees. They're doing well. They're doing it the right way. They're doing it in a sustainable way. They're not just after one sort of binary, either you're profitable or you're not. It can't live like that. And I think if you look at read the tea leaves and you hear people like Mark Benioff, for example, we're leaving a world of capitalism as we know it, and we're entering a world of stakeholder capitalism where there are people that actually care that the company is not just making money, but they're making money and they're also thinking about their net carbon, that there's zero net carbon. So they're not putting any carbon into the atmosphere. And so I think about that same way with medicine. And so when we look forward, and I clearly, there's no one that's going to be able to give you a step play by play of everything that happens, but we are in this situation right now that is dire, to say the least, where we have a novel virus that is spreading rapidly and killing people. Our cherished older population is dying super easily to this virus. And so that will spawn, I think, a lot of innovation that will allow us to quickly detect potential future viruses, treat potential future viruses, and come up with some way to prevent future viruses. And so, but that's just part of the equation, because if you look beyond that, I believe we are getting closer and closer to a point where through the technology that exists today, we will be able to extend our life at an exponential level beyond what we are today. And so this fascinates me. It's also something that I always seek knowledge, and I'm a learner of this area, but like who isn't curious about, I don't think we'll get to a point where we're living forever, but certainly extending our life at a far, I'd say greater incline level than what we've seen in previous years, centuries, millennia, call it what you may. The amount of increase we've seen has been marginal or incremental. I think over the next year, we could see increasing lifespans on a greater level and potentially even start to see an exponential increase to our lifespans lengthened.
So kind of the end game hope is that maybe one day you're at a social event and you bump into Peter Thiel and you're reminiscing how you've known each other for 100 years.
Right. You never know. Right. And it's funny because I actually mentioned him in a video I made recently.
I just pulled him out of thin air because he's at the forefront of the extension, him and Ray Kurzweil and Peter Attia and,
Ray Kurzweil, yeah, of course, yeah. I mean, and so it's a combination of like the singularity. Speaking of Ray Kurzweil, so
right.
The singularity, like in the next 10 years, there will be a point where our computers have sort of surpassed what we're capable of, in some ways. And so, that being said, I mean, I've given you like sort of the long and maybe more medium, but in the more short term, what I'll say is it's interesting because obviously, if I had a choice between Bernie, Trump, or Biden, I certainly wouldn't pick Trump. Would be the last choice. Yeah. And so then the next question is, okay, Bernie or Biden. And I don't know if your question had a political angle, but I assume that's at least. Well,
feel free to volunteer. I mean, I wasn't trying to put you on the spot necessarily, but I'll take it. I mean, and this is who we choose. This ultimately has, what's the most overused cliche, consequences of elections are real. So for better or worse, feel free to opine to your liking, but I'm not pushing. Yeah, no. So, I mean, I supported, Pete actually. I did too. Pete was my guy. Pete was my guy.
So I mean, I Yang was my guy. Yang and Pete, but Yang dropped out.
Like him too,
Yes. So and then ultimately, even though he lacks quote unquote experience beyond being the mayor, I'm gauging it on the person, right?
I thought he was clearly one of the smartest people.
Guy's brilliant.
Who has run in my memory.
The guy is brilliant. I mean, he's not president
Obama
someday,
level smart. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, I agree. And so I just think that he had the wits and the intelligence and everything that goes into it. Now, when he backed Biden and when everyone else
rapid succession,
the handwriting was on the wall, that the momentum was in the Biden court.
Right.
And so, with Biden, there's some liabilities. And so, his voting record, his current, he's always been a gaffe machine, but it's more prevalent now than ever. And so, there's concern that he's potentially, there is literally something health-wise going on.
As we record this, that was at least when I last checked Twitter before we got on the call. I was, yes, it had been 6 days since he appeared, and then he made an appearance because he's got like a broadcast thing set up at his home. and a lot was made of the clip where it said that he seemed lost and out of touch, and I watched it, and as a production guy, I thought he's waiting to be told the feed is over. I thought I saw the end of the feed where he kind of said his piece and smiled at the camera.
Interesting.
And is waiting for somebody to say, "Okay, we're off air." That's what I thought I heard. But other people are saying that he was in a fugue state and was about to walk into traffic. I said over 2 years ago, and I hope I'm wrong about this. I really hope I'm wrong, but I'm saying this for full disclosure. I mean, not that anybody's tracking what I say necessarily, but I mean, I've said it publicly. I've said it to people privately. That, I mean, I feel like he's a very decent man, of course, but I said he has so many skeletons in his closet. Now, you think as compared to Trump, like what could you dredge out of Biden's past that compares? You know, you've got like the version of that on steroids in Trump's closet, I would assume, but I said, I mean, 2 years ago, I said, if Biden is the nominee, get ready for 4 more years of Trump. I said, I think there is no way he beats Trump. Now, I've seen enough pre-COVID explosion to think, well, maybe it's possible, but I think he's just, I don't think Bernie beats him either. And I liked Bernie in 2016. Yeah. You know, I don't really love, you know, I mean, Bernie sort of had his time and his shot, and I like some of his points and I respect him, but yeah, I said again over 2 years ago, if Biden's the nominee, I said it ain't gonna happen. I don't think Biden's gonna be president for a lot of reasons. I hope I'm wrong. I hope I'm wrong.
You and I have very similar. It sounds like very. So if you had asked me 2 years ago, I would have said this exact same thing about Biden. I didn't see it, and I'm starting to see there's a possibility, especially with everything going on now. I think Trump is not making his case stronger unless we have a remarkable now. If we don't go into a massive medical, like just absolutely horrific medical emergency state where we are short of ventilators, and we already are, like, it's clear we're short if it gets bigger, but if like things sort of like do get mild, he's got I think a very good shot at winning because he's got his base. Like his base is
they're not going anywhere.
Biden, on the other hand, doesn't though. I mean, like he's got the moderates maybe, but he doesn't have the Bernie supporters. And so with Bernie, like I admire and respect Bernie in many, many ways. Mm-hmm. Where I struggle to believe in him and back him is that I believe that he is so resolute with his way that it's challenging to be able to work with somebody that has such incredibly strong ideals and willpower that he's almost immovable. If that's a word. Like he is unwilling. He's uncompromisingly, rigid in his viewpoints. And so
absolutely,
for somebody to lead a country that has so many different viewpoints, I think you have to be willing to make some concessions. I also think if you do the math on some of his ideas, that they do become eye-opening, alarmingly, expensive. And not to say that they don't have all the right intention. I think the intention's there. Yeah, but as far as like getting the support, it's not. Now, ironically, we are moving more of his socialist, quote unquote, socialist ideals are happening.
Exactly.
Just by
bail out everything that's going to blow up otherwise.
It's so crazy just to see like how this is all unwinding. But I think with Bernie is he doesn't get he's as polarizing as a Hillary Clinton. Like I didn't mind Hillary myself, but I know how much she is absolutely loathed.
Yeah, she's super polarizing.
She's loathed. She's loathed by both ends of the polls, right? Yeah. She's maybe more. She's like the leftist of the left and the rightist of the right all hate her, and so she's just hated. What I think Bernie has going for him is, to your point, I believe he is a good guy. Now, does he change his viewpoints, or has he changed his viewpoints through the years? 100%. So he doesn't have anywhere close to the track record that Bernie Sanders has from like sticking to his point and always voting in a very similar fashion. and believing in ideas then in a very sort of consistent way. But Bernie, but he does, I believe, have the right intention, and I believe the heart is there. I do think he's a decent human being, and I think he will surround himself with the right people, which I think for my final point on this topic, at least, is with Biden, it's all about who he picks, like who he picks as the VP and who he surrounds himself with. So I think that's going to be the defining, my opinion, the defining way he is allowing himself to potentially get into office.
Who do you think you'll pick? Prediction
right
time.
Right now, my money is on Klobuchar. Okay. But I could change that. Harris definitely has a shot, but I it's just a matter of whether he wants to continue to ensure
whether he wants to win or not.
Yeah.
Nothing against Amy, but picking another boring white person is not the guaranteed ticket to success. I think. Well, who would you like it to be in the realm of reality? I mean,
well, you already said it would
maybe
be
Eddie Van Halen for no
good
reason for that choice.
My pick would have been Pete, and I put that out publicly because he was my pick for president. So I at least would love to see him as VP. But clearly, he's already made the commitment. Kind of low key, kind of low charisma white. Well, two kind of low key white guys. Well, yeah. I mean, then there's a number of other things that Pete, like the lack of experience.
Sure,
he does. Now let's just face it, the black vote does matter.
Unfortunately, right? my black friends are. I mean, I have a few friends who don't look like me who love Pete. But that kills me. That kills me that he couldn't get over that. That was such an op on him. That was such a hit. I know. It really pisses me off.
And me too.
And then the echo of that, I unfollowed a lot of my black Twitter friends or people who were amplifying. I mean, not people who were reporting on the facts, but people who were like putting the emotion and were clearly trying to take him down. I'm like, okay, I don't need to know you anymore.
Right. If it's going to be, it's like, hate based. And
exactly.
You're not just blanketly.
It goes all ways. Yeah, it goes all ways. So you would.
I'm saying Klobuchar, Kamala Harris maybe, but I'd say Klobuchar. I don't think it will be Warren. I just think there's too much of a difference. In now the one advantage you get with Warren is that you're going to pull in her voter base, but I think most of her voter base already will go.
I think they'll support anyway. They'll support the nominee.
Exactly. So I think you do need to go more middle of the road with general. And so that's why I think Amy's the logical choice I think she's more middle of the road. She's going to help secure the Midwest. What about you? Who do you think?
I think Kamala Harris is, I think I agree with you. I think there's a significant likelihood that he chooses Klobuchar. I think there's also a high likelihood that he chooses Kamala Harris. And again, everybody, human beings are complex. And if you've lived a life and you've gone through some journey, everybody has decisions or judgments or rulings or votes that are going to bite them in the ass when you dredge up the past. And Kamala's she's got some serious, basically she was kind of tough, was sort of the gist of it to me, but not to minimize the things that people take issue with. But bottom line is I guess I'm rooting for Kamala mostly because, yes, my friends who couldn't get on board with Brother Pete will get on board for Sister Kamala. So
yeah, either way, I'm happy, and so as of right now, I'm definitely, I'd say there's a bit of optimism that I have, especially in light of the way in which the coronavirus has been handled. I think you cannot make a compelling argument that it's been handled flawlessly. Have they done some things well? Sure. And I don't want to but like by and large, there has been mistake after mistake after mistake made. It's almost a comedy of errors, and it would be if people weren't dying.
Well, if you want to hear me go off about it, just you can have me on your show or something. Yeah, because God knows I've said enough about it already. But yeah, look here. There's the old thing of can you define irony? No, but I know it when I see it. I can define irony. Here's irony. I evacuate from China ahead of this starting to really spread and get bad, come back to the U.S. Because I'm worried about my healthcare and safety.
You need to go back.
and then last night on our kind of nightly video chat, my girlfriend, who's Chinese, lives in Beijing. She's ordered me like a personal supply, like 10, but she's ordered me masks and a couple of protective goggles and some gloves. So my girlfriend in China is going to ship me some emergency supplies and is worried about my health care as I sit here in Los Angeles.
Oh yeah, I mean it
and
is,
so that's irony to me.
The irony is
I would say
rich,
that's
my
irony.
friend. Yeah,
it is. You can cut it with a chainsaw.
So, but you're here nonetheless, and
yeah.
you know, obviously you are in control of how many situations you put yourself in to potentially be infected, and I'm just hopeful that enough people have the good sense to not tempt fate. And when I say tempt fate, not only for themselves, but for other people, because and we speak about irony. What's ironic is if we are overreacting, it's actually, we're gonna find out, like if the hospitals still fill up and we're doing this, boy, how much worse would it have been if we didn't do it? But like, we're never going to know exactly what it would have been like. And that's the irony, is that like, if they say we overreacted after the fact, hey, great. That means it worked. So that's what's crazy.
It's that catch-22 that I saw one article about it the other day. I think it was a news video clip that I didn't watch, but I saw the headline, and essentially the gist of it was that if our measures are effective, then if the strict measures are effective, then the critics will say it was unnecessary, while not acknowledging that's why, you know, the results worked. They had to go sort of hardcore lockdown mode to do the best you can to contain it. Last question, and again, this is your guest number 2 on this sort of new flavor of this show, Ben Rock being the first, and it came up organically, and now I've got it in my notes. Find the upside. And you've touched on a few things, but I'll let you see what you think is sort of the dominant thing that sticks with you, or the most important things. But find the upside for me here from your point of view.
Well, I think I have to. So there's a lot, but as I already mentioned, necessity is the mother of innovation. So when we're forced to do something out of necessity, we are able to accomplish incredible things. So I think, to me, the upside is this is a major shakeup from a variety of standpoints. And so for those that allow themselves to get too consumed with how bad the news is, I think that they're focused too much on what they don't control. And I think the upside is remembering what we do control. And so we control our own actions. We control how we respond to situations. We control what we do when we get up in the morning, and we control what we do throughout our entire day until we go to sleep. And we control, in a large degree, we have the ability to control even our own subconscious through meditation, through mindfulness. And in a lot of ways, we can program ourselves to act in a way that will do good. And I think for me, you know, one of the guests I had on my show talked about programs. And so we can either run an outdated old program, or we can update our programs. And so when I say that, what I mean is, think about, you know, a computer. There's hardware that exists, but then there's also the software within that program, or within that hardware that runs it. And I think we, as a species, and this is what my guest shared, is we get stuck running programs from our past. Maybe it's something that we learned and observed growing up, and we saw our parents act a certain way. Maybe it's the way we act at work and watching our boss or watching our coworkers. Maybe it's, you know, something that we end up teaching our kids, and our kids start using those programs. What I would say to anyone listening to this show is, challenge your own daily programs and figure out how you can use the current situation to update your programs to take into account the world that we live in today. And so, yes, these changes seem startling and they seem at times unbearable and scary. But at the same time, we are an incredibly resilient species. There's a reason that we aren't, we are human beings. There's a reason that you and I are sitting here talking to each other, and that we're not back in the Stone Age throwing rocks at each other, right? And so we have evolved to a point that I believe we have so much control over how we carry ourselves on a day-to-day basis. And so the upside for me is that we will see new industries emerge. We will see industries evolve and change. And the people that are ahead of the curve, that don't get in their own way and that allow themselves to focus on what they control, they're in the driver's seat. And so I would suggest, and this is the premise of my show, is moments of insight happen when our brain is quiet. They don't happen when our brain is busy with activity, because our prefrontal cortex, which is the part of our brain immediately behind our forehead, it's a small part of our brain. And the main function that it has is to think critically and to solve problems and be more of our conscious part of our brain. Now, our subconscious part of our brain controls our breathing, our heart rate, all these, and that's our even our unconscious, like all of that. It's going to happen regardless of you needing to think about it or not. You don't need to think. My heart, come on, beat heart, beat, keep beating or breathing. You don't really need to think about it. Now, you can, of course, mindfully think about breathing, and that's healthy. But my point is, our brains are always in a state of overflooding our prefrontal cortex with riddles to solve and problems to fix and all these sorts of things. If we allow our brain to be quiet by taking a walk, by taking a shower, if you ever think about it, sometimes the best ideas happen when we are in a weird, I would say, almost uninteresting place. And that's because our brain isn't overthinking. And so what I suggest to anyone listening is give yourself more quiet moments throughout the day. Allow yourselves to think without all the noise of everything that's going on. And all of a sudden things are going to click. The dots are going to be connected. And what you're going to allow yourself to do is to put yourself in the driver's seat, put yourself in position to capitalize on this truly, I would say, historicals and it doesn't give it even, we are in historical times. We will look back. This is another 9/11. And if anything, far bigger than 9/11. And so when anything major historical happens, there's always going to be people that use it to their advantage to think about how can they help so this doesn't happen in the future, or how can they help evolve society so that we're better prepared when we have this situation arise again. And so to me, there's a ton of silver lining. If anything, there's more silver lining than not, but it's all in how you think about it. And it's all in you allowing yourself and us collectively allowing ourselves to think and not just be consumed with what's happening, but actually give yourself a little bit more quiet time to be more proactive and think about how you can be involved to be a part of the solution as opposed to being immersed in the problem.
Billy, I love it. We're very much on the same page. It's really fun to discover that as we get into this kind of in-depth conversation about all this. How can people find you or your work online? Where do you like to kind of point people as a general reference point for you?
Yeah, thanks for asking. So podcast, it's available on every podcast network, but my website is insightoutshow.com. And then my personal website, which I'm actually building as we speak. So by the time if you're releasing on Friday, it may not be 100% up, but it's Billy Samoa. So I was born in American Samoa. So BILLYSAMOA.com. You could find all my work there as well. So available at either of those two places.
Fantastic. I'll put that in the show notes for those of you who don't have a pen handy or a bad memory like me. Billy SALEEBEY. Thank you, man.
Thank you. No, it's been fun. I really enjoyed our conversation and appreciate having me on your show.
All right. Thanks to you for listening, and thanks to Billy for his time. I really appreciate him being on the show. You can chase him down via either insightoutshow.com, that is for his podcast, or his more general, all-encompassing site is simply billysamoa.com. Those links are both in the show notes in case you can be spelling challenged, like all of us can sometimes. On behalf of, well, myself, frankly, I hope everybody is staying safe, staying healthy, and trying to stay sane in this time. I'm Brendan Davis. I appreciate you listening. And good Lord willing, I'll see you here next week on If I Knew You Better.